What's happening, guys? Scott from Hornet Interconnect. Welcome back to episode 23 of Tutorial Tuesday. As always, so good to see you. In today's episode, I want to show you how we transformed the lower instrument panel into the avionics bay, and it looks so damn good. I'm really pleased with the result, and I want to show you a couple of things that I learned along the way. I also want to show you how to read the interconnect and how to wire your pit with confidence going into the new year. And yes, it's that time of year approaching. Christmas is around the corner, so I want to show you a couple pieces of equipment that you might want to put down on your Christmas wish list so you can get something nice under the tree this year that is going to help you for the rest of your pit building time. And then you're going to have just really good equipment in your workshop for future projects. So let's get into it. Really cool episode ahead. Let's start off with the big unit, and that is the power supply unit. I'm using Corsair's RM850. It's the RM series 850 watt power supply unit. And it's the 2023 model. A little bit different to the product number called out in the Open Hornet documents, as well as the Fusion files, but that's just because things upgrade as the years go by. Little bit shorter in height, it's 20 mil shorter. So I've had to upgrade these little brackets at the bottom. I've just raised them 20 mil, and I'll add those files into the links below and how you can get those. That way, if you get the similar unit, you two will have the correct spacing and you won't ever have to adjust the SVG files or the framing files. It's all compatible. All I've done is just raise the power supply up to meet the cradle on the top. Now these pieces that you see are printed in PETG and they're 100% infill. I really want that strength and heat resistance because it's going to get quite warm in here. I've prepped and primed them the usual way, and then I've got them painted them with a 3:2 yellow to green ratio, and I've just used the airbrush for that. The color is similar to Gecko, but a little bit off, and I love that because it gives it some color contrast, some color texture, and it's making this area here look so good. Even though we'll never see it again, but I love it. And when I do maintenance in this area, I want that pride to come through knowing that we spent time and effort doing it properly. So we've installed a couple of key circuit boards that we'll talk about later in the episode. The cable management looks so damn good. It is professional, it is clean, it is organized, but the main thing is it is safe. And I'm going to show you how to do that so you can get the same results as well. And yeah, that's about it. We've gotten started installing the StarTech HDMI connector, and then we've got area here for the USB hubs. So let's get across to the studio now. Let's read the interconnect. I'm going to show you in about 5 to 10 minutes how to actually read it and understand it. And then we're going to go start cable lacing and getting this all wired up. I think it's going to be a really good episode ahead. Alrighty, let's get into it. Let's show you how the interconnect works and how to read it. Now, if you're new here and you don't know what this term interconnect is, it's just a document that shows you how the cockpit is connected together, and it gives you a little bit of detail on PCB and cable requirements. So where do we find it? Well, let's go to our favorite folder, Open Hornet Build Package version 0.2.0. And if you haven't seen the previous episodes, go check them out. It's going to show you how to download this. Everything here is for free. We want to stay in the main build package folder. We're not going to go to any subfolders, and we're going to go open up this PDF document here called Open Hornet System Interconnect. And at the time of this recording, it's version 10. And we open that one up, and it's going to give us a 6-page document. Every page is its own section. So the very first page shows you the top level view. Then we go into the upper instrument panel, lower instrument panel, left side console, center tub and seat, and then we've got the right side console as well. But we just want to focus on the lower instrument panel today, which is on page 3. If we look at this and we don't really zoom in, it looks incredibly complicated and you almost are off-put by how intense it is. But I can tell you, I'm going to show you in 5 minutes how to read this, and you're going to have the confidence to read every other page after this. It really is simple. Now, if we just have a brief overview, we don't need to zoom in at this. It's just a surface level look. We can see that a lot of our components or a lot of our detail in this is surrounded by blue boxes. A blue box indicates a system or a section. So if we go and zoom in, let's just go up to the top left here. We can see that this blue box here is about the PSU, that's the power supply unit. This box here is everything to do with pit management. We can scroll down and use that same principle, This box here on the left-hand side is everything to do with the video record or the video record panel, the AMPCD, and we've got everything here, RWR controller. So all we got to know is blue boxes is a system or a subsection. Now, if we zoom back into the top left, which is by the PSU section, we can see that these two blue boxes are connected by green lines. Those green lines depict wires or cable bundles connecting two systems. And they're either going to be connected by a box, which we can see here, and that is a Molex connector, or they're connected by these crescents and dashes, which are your general input-output pins. That's the two things you need to know. If you see a box, it's a Molex connector. If it's a crescent and a dash, it's most likely going to be a pin. And then we can see coming out of this Molex connector here, we've got a green line, but then it goes to black text. All that means is that text will link to somewhere else on this page. It is because we don't want a rat's nest of green wires connecting. It just says, hey, this BL control power connects to BL control power somewhere else. But I'm going to show you that a little bit later on. So recap, blue boxes, system or subsection. Each blue box is connected to another system or subsection by a green line, which is the wire bundle. Those wires are either connected via Molex connectors or input-output pins. So now that we know the surface level of the interconnect, let's see if we can identify a couple of wires and how we can create them. Then you can take this knowledge and apply it to every other wire you see. So let's look at the PSU. This is what we're really working on. We want to connect the heart of the SIM, and we're going to start with the power supply unit, because every cable kind of branches out from there when it comes to powering the PID. So we can see that this yellow box here connects to a lot of connectors and cables. Well, this yellow box, if we look at the green text above it, says it's the ABSYS ATX PSU breakout. Now that is the name of the circuit board that we need to go print. We can find that circuit board if we go back to our main folder, we go electronics, and we can see ABSYS ATX PSU breakout. That is that circuit board. Now, if you're wondering what ABSYS means, it is just Open Hornet's own Arduino-based simulator interface system, ABSYS. That's what it's talking about. So you'll see it everywhere. ABSYS, ABSYS, ABSYS. It's talking about the interface system from Open Hornet. So we know that this circuit board connects to all these connectors, but what does that look like? Well, if we look down here, I've gone and pre-assembled most of the PSU circuit board just so you can kind of see a bit of everything. This here does not look like what this picture shows. It looks completely different, but how do we know what's what? Well, if we just look at the screen here, we can see some names and some of them kind of make sense. 12 volt accessory, 5 volt accessory, there's an ABSYS bus power here. We can see that it connects up into the pit management and it also connects into all these wires, but how do we know what these connectors are? Well, let's take BL bus for example, and it's got a little purple, maroon, brown, whatever color you want to call it, J3 next to it. J3 is the connectors identifier. But how do we find more information on J3? Well, if we go back to our main folder, and this is why I say have it somewhere easy to access. You're going to be in this folder a lot. We stay in electronics, we go to the PSU breakout, and we open up the PDF within that document, and it opens up a brand new PDF. This will show you important notes for every circuit board and how to make it. If we just have a look here on the left, we've got this here, power sources. It gives you notes about the quality of the power supply that you need. It tells you notes about if this connector is needed or not, depending on what you're using to power your SIM. But we want to focus on pin J3. If we go back to the interconnect, J3 is on the BL bus, and it's got all this weird naming convention here. So let's drill into it and work out how we can identify each of those sections. Well, zooming in, we've got connector J3, and it's connected to the Arduino-based simulator interface system, ABSYS backlight. There we go. So we already know that this connector has to do something with backlighting. Well, that's probably what that BL is for, backlight bus. Well, okay, this is making sense. We know that green lines connect blue boxes or systems and subsections to other blue boxes. So we know that this connection must connect our PSU breakout to the backlight. Well, where is the backlight? You can either search it in your PDF if you want to use Control F, or you can just have a bit of a pan around, and I know that backlight is in the top right here. So can you see it's got a green line? Ignore the green text. It says BL backlight control power. That BL control power connects up to this backlight control power and joins into the backlight controller PCB, which is this one here. Let's move this across. So now we've got two circuit boards. We know that this power supply unit must connect a cable to this one here. We're getting there, but how do we connect it? Well, let's have a look. We know that we've got a connection. We can see by the boxes that we are using Molex connectors. We're not using input-output DuPont pins. We're using the nice big Molex connectors you'd see on a power supply unit. And we can see that our green line has this green text. The top level of this text in brackets, 2A13W1, is the wire bundle, the looms identifier. That way we know what we're talking about. But underneath it, we've got abscess CAD XXX. That is the type of cable that we need for this. Now you're asking, Scott, how am I meant to know what abscess CAD XXX is? Well, can I tell you that Open Hornet has thought of it all? They've got it there. We just need to know where to find it. It's not that tricky when you know where to find stuff. Let's go back into the root folder of build package version 0.2.0 and we go to specifications. If there's anything that Open Hornet wants you to do specifically, they will tell you through the specification section. And we go abscess cables. We can see here that it says, unless otherwise specified, this is the cable conventions. Now we were looking for abscess CAD XXX. It's an abscess type D backlight power bus cable. The CA is just cable. It's a D type, and XXX is wire length in millimeters. Now they haven't specified the wire length. We can go fill in those X's ourselves, or they may update that later on. Now if we look here, it tells you everything we need. The connector is the part that crimps onto the wire. If you have a wire with two plugs, the connector refers to what is attached to the wire. So for this loom or this bundle, we need two of these. The 3901 3105 is the product number if you had to search it on DigiKey, or you've got the Molex number, which is 5557. It's a 10R black connector and it needs a female crimp within it. The conductor is the wire. It's the wire itself, and it's saying, hey, we need 10 16 gauge stranded braided conductors with white insulation. And we're using stranded because it's a lot more flexible, allows you to do a bit more intricate wiring routes. And it mates with 3901, 2101, or the Molex number there with a male crimp. And they are these ones here, these two 5x2 connectors. So the connector itself is what attaches to the wire. The conductor is the wire itself. It mates with the connectors on the circuit board. So we've just gone, without needing to go to a Fusion document, without needing to ask for help on the Discord, we've gone and learned how to create the wire bundle ourselves. So let's go back here and we can see that it doesn't actually look that complicated anymore. We can find any wire cable ourselves, use the same knowledge, and go from there. So let's have a look at one more and then we'll wrap it up and start doing some fun things. Let's have a look at J6. It's connected to bus 3. Nothing here specifically says bus 3, but it's part of a name. But how do we find more information on bus 3? Well, we know that it is identified by connector J6. It has a green line. We're using these square blocks in the schematic showing that it's a Molex connector. That's its name. And we're using an abscess cable C-type, and it doesn't have a specified length, and it connects to LC abscess power. Now we can use a bit of deductive reasoning. If that is backlighting, this would be lower instrument panel. Upper, it must be the left console abscess power. As simple as that. It really is that simple. And there we go. You've just learned the interconnect. So let's take this knowledge, let's go and build these cables, and I'm going to show you some special things about these circuit boards, and I think we are good to go. So the first board that we're going to have a look at is the ATX Power Supply Unit Breakout Board. It is a fairly special board. It's a bit different to what we usually use. It may look the same, but its construction is different. This here is a 4-layer circuit board. It's different in the sense of we've got our usual top and bottom layer copper, but now we have additional 2 layers of copper in the middle, allowing for better routing, better energy management, creating them as power planes, all that good stuff. So we're going to need to go onto our website when we upload the Gerber file, and I'm using PCBWay for this. We're going to go and select 4-layer board. Now the next thing we need to pick, once we've selected our color and all that, we need to go down and select the copper fill. And we're using 2-ounce copper. The heavier the copper in the layer, the better properties it's got when it comes to energy management, thermal management. It's gonna have less resistance, which means the board's not gonna get as hot. It can handle more current. That's why Open Hornet has used such specifications on this board. It is the main heart of the pit. We want this to be a heavy duty board. Now the thing with these heavy duty boards is they don't solder as easily as smaller boards, because all of that copper is like a big heat sink. So if you are using a standard conical tip or even a small flat edge tip for your soldering, it's gonna suck all that heat away from the soldering iron tip. So you're going to need a solder tip that's a little larger. Now this is what's called a screwdriver tip or a chisel tip, and it's 5.2 mil across. You boost the temperature up, you want what's called high thermal mass. It's where that soldering tip can just punch heat into the pad real quickly, heating it up. Now you know if you don't have the correct tip is if you can tin it and it's successfully melting your solder, but the moment you touch the soldering tip to the pad and then you try and melt the solder, it just gets too cool. It's because that circuit board is sucking all that heat away. So let that be Christmas present idea number 1. Get yourself a nice soldering iron if you don't have one already. It will pay for itself in the long run. So let's get into it. We now know the boards. The backlighting control board is very similar. It's a 2-layer board though, but it's still using 2-ounce copper. So always go and read those important instructions in the circuit board files. So let's go now and change out this PSU cable that came with the power supply in the box. It's about 1.5 feet, almost 2 feet length, and we want to make it shorter because we don't want all this cable sitting in the pit. So let's start dissecting it. Let's remove the heat shrinks around the edges, and then I'm going to start cutting away the harness sheath from the bundle, paying attention not to go and accidentally cut one of these wires. Once we've got the heat shrink and the sheath away, we can see all the wires exposed. Now what we want to do is start labeling each of these wires. That way when we connect it to our new 24-pin connector, we know which one is going where. Now the back of this 24-pin connector, the pin numbers are printed on the plastic itself. So we can see pin 1 all the way through to 24. Now Christmas present idea number 2, let's see if you can get yourself one of these under the tree this year. It is the Dymo Rhino 4200. It is an awesome label maker that not only prints your normal plastic and paper labels, but it also prints onto heat shrink, giving you some really clean, crisp labeling on all your wire bundles. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start printing flags, which is just a double-sided label, and we're going to flag each of the wires from 1 to 24. That way when we cut the cables, we know where they go again. When I'm adding the flag to the cable, I don't pull the paper backing off all the way. I just remove a little bit so I can still secure it to the cable, but it allows it to free run along the entire length of the cable. That way I can connect it right at the pin number so I know I'm labeling the right pin. And then when we're ready and we're ready to cut it, we can slide it all the way to the other end and cut the correct length. You don't want to try weave your way through a rat's nest and then label it at the wrong end. You may possibly pick the wrong wire up. Something to be cautious of when doing this, have a look for pins 10, 13, 19, and 21. They are double wired pins, which means that there are 2 wires going into the 1 connector port on the 24 pin. And they are generally coming from each of these split ports that connect into the power supply unit. So when you do flag these, just wrap them up together initially and flag both of them at the same time. That way you know there are 2 of them. and then write down those 4 numbers and double check that your power supply unit has that same config. If not, just flag the double wires on yours. Now that I've gone and flagged everything, I've gone back to the pit, I've gone and measured the total length of the wire that I want, and it's about 170 mil. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line it up here on my silicon cutting board or my soldering board, and I'm actually gonna cut it at 200 mil. This gives me a bit of wiggle room. Don't go and cut to 170 straight away. I'm gonna give it a little bit of wiggle room. That way, if we do cut short or the wire was bent, we know we've got some space. And I always pay attention to any flag that might slip off. Use tape if you have to like secure bundles once you've cut them. The last thing you want is once you start cutting, those flags slipping off and multiple flags slipping off. It's gonna be a nightmare to try piece them back together. Not impossible, just a nightmare. After cutting everything to 200 mil roughly in length, I then go and use the open end of the flags and I re-peel the rest of that backing tape off. And this is where I'm now gonna secure them properly to the flag itself. Because once we start crimping, and once we start connecting it back into the ports, wires are gonna go everywhere. They're gonna get thrown about. We don't want these flags coming off. This is now where we want to stick the flag to the wire. Now, once we've got all the flags on, I've actually double labeled all the double pins. So we've got 2 lots of 10 flags, 2 lots of 13, etc. Let's go grab ourselves a pair of stripping pliers, and I'm gonna start stripping about 5 mil off the end of each wire, giving us a good purchase for our crimps. Time to have a look at Christmas present number 3. If you don't have a pair of crimping pliers, go online, get a link, pop it on your wish list, see if you can get one of these under the tree this year, because they're actually quite nice. I'm gonna pop a link below of like where I got mine. I got these from AliExpress and they've just been wonderful. It's a good size range and shape for DuPont connectors as well as the Molex connector. So you're not really going to go wrong with them. And yeah, they're not expensive at all. A really good stocking filler if you're looking for something in everyone's budget. They're about $20, $30 and they've done the trick really well. So let's start crimping. And then when we get to the double connectors, I'll show you how I crimp those. When it comes to the double crimp, if we have a look down here, we can see that the crimp won't really fit over 2 16 gauge wires. It's a little too thick. So let's grab our stripping pliers again and let's strip off about 10 to 12 mil of that insulation from the end of the wire. And then we're gonna use the tip of these to help twist them in if you're not getting a good purchase with your fingertips. And then we're gonna apply the crimp on the wire itself, not the insulation. It's gonna hold it in really nice. Don't solder these, because if you go and solder thinking you're gonna hold it together really well, and then you go and crimp the solder joint, it's gonna crush that joint, it's gonna create fractures in it, it's gonna create a bad joint. Just let the crimp hold the wires together. If you've twisted them well and you've given them enough length, you're not gonna have any issues. And now that that's done, let's go and follow our flags and just add them to our 24-piece connector. It is a 1-to-1 connection type. Especially with all the Open Hornet Molex connectors, port number 1 on one connector connects to port number 1 on the other connector. You're not looking for this beautifully mirrored connector. They're going 1-to-1, 2-to-2, 3-to-3, so forth. Now, before I add the final wire, I'm going to go onto the dynamo again. I'm going to go print out the wire identifier. It's that number above the green line on the interconnect. Even though I know that this is going to be the power supply, it's the only 24-pin connector, I still want the same convention and the same neat wiring standard across all my bundles. And I'm just going to add it here to this double pin here. And then we're going to finally put that into the connector. And I'm going to use one of these little heat guns or these heat nozzle pens, and it's going to go and shrink that heat shrink really nicely. And you're not going to need to use a flame, a torch or whatever. Just grab one of these, another good stocking filler for your Christmas list. And now that's all done, we have a really solid harness here. It actually looks quite good. It's a little bit loose in the sense of it can be tied together and cable managed a bit better. But for what we're seeing now, it's looking really good. Now there are 2 types of cable management I want to teach you, using cable ties and why and when they would be used, as well as cable lacing, and that's the coolest one. So for the purpose of this, because I want to make sure this works, it's a temporary fix, let's use some cable ties and cable tie this harness together. Cable ties have their place in avionics. It's not this thing of don't ever use a cable tie. Cable ties are used because they're cheap, they're quick, they're good for easy bundling, but they're not for permanent solutions. They are there for if an area is being worked on a lot or it's constantly being modified, that's when we'd use a cable tie to tie things together, especially if you're using those Velcro type cable ties. Now, I want this to be a temporary solution while I make sure that this power supply cable actually fits and it harnesses well. And then we can come back later and we can lace it all up. Now that the PSU cable's in, let's go and look at another cable bundle, and it's going to be this cable bundle that I've gone and measured and cut and crimped, and it's connecting our PSU breakout to the backlight controller. And I know that it's a permanent cable assembly. I'm happy with its length. I know it's going to fit. Let's show you how to cable lace it. So what is cable lacing? Well, cable lacing is a way of bundling wires together using a waxed nylon or linen cord of different thicknesses, and it's a permanent solution, and it's a real crisp solution as well. It's used for areas where there's a lot of vibration. You don't want these cable ties rubbing, they're bulky. This is going to give you a slim, streamlined solution. And if you use this, you can pull large lengths of wire bundles through baffles, through holes, and it's never going to foul. That's why this cable lacing is used. So cable lacing is quite cool, and it's definitely got its time and place, and we're going to use it now. So what we're going to do is get ourselves a nice long length, about 1.5 to 2 times the length. Don't shortchange yourself. Get yourself a nice roll. This is about 100 meters, and then you can always cut it off. And as you get better, you'll learn how much you really need. Now, the first step you want to do is create yourself at the start of your cable loom. You want to start it with a square knot. Now, if you're not sure what a square knot is, you may have heard another term for it called a reef knot. And essentially, that's going to be our starting point. And then we're going to continue starting it with 2 lock stitches. And then we're going to pull those nice and tight together. And then that is how we're going to start. And this waxed cable, or this waxed nylon, really holds tight really nicely, and it's really strong. So don't be afraid to really tighten it in. It's not floss. Now that we've got it started, let's go and create even lengths along the way, and the spacing of these lock stitches just really depends on the thickness and flexibility of your cable and how tight you want that bundle. Because we're using quite flexible wires with the silicon, I'm going to maybe space these about 1 inch apart. And remembering every time you make that lock stitch, you want to pull it nice and tight, really get those wires bundled in, and that's how you're going to get that nice cylindrical loom. There we go. And as you're going along, make sure that this parallel cord line stays nice and straight. You don't want it wrapping around your bundle. Even just looking at, oh, this just looks so good. I'm 2 stitches in and it's looking great. Oh, wow. Now terminate, pulling that knot nice and tight, and then we're going to terminate the exact same way with 2 lock stitches, and then that square knot at the end, pulling those knots nice and tight. Now, if you want to put a little dab of glue on that terminating knot, feel free. It's going to give it a little bit more security, but if you've pulled the knots tight and there's not a lot of vibration, you're not really going to have an issue. There you've got 2 ways for cable management. You've got cable ties for your non-permanent, quick, fast, cost-effective way of cable management. And then we've got our permanent solution here, which is cable lacing, which just looks so damn good. I'm really happy with it. So go out, use both of these in your toolkit. There is no one right way. Just ask yourself, how often am I going to be modifying this? If it's a lot, I'm going to use a cable tie. If this is the last time I'm adjusting this wire bundle, let's put some time and effort into it, and let's cable lace it so we know it's nice and streamlined. So let's head to the pit, get this installed, and then you'll be on your way. There we go. I think we're done. I'm really, really happy with how this is looking. It's actually coming together really nice, but we've had a good episode. We know how to read the interconnect now. I've shown you how to get your head around the different symbology, the naming conventions, where to find data within the Open Hornet system if you ever have a question. We've also gone into cable management, which is such a key component in keeping yourself organized, but mainly safe in this cockpit building hobby. If you have a rat's nest of wires, you're going to create excess heat, and you don't want that, especially around a wooden structure like this. You want to keep yourself safe as the #1 priority. And yeah, if you keep yourself safe, you keep it organized, by default, it's going to look cool. And we've got ourselves a little Santa list now of Christmas present ideas that we might want to see coming under the tree. And they're all fairly reasonably priced as well, make sure it fits into everyone's budget. So yeah, go enjoy your week ahead. Go get cable lacing, send me photos of what yours looks like. I'd love to see it. I don't care what airframe you're doing. I don't care how far into it you are. I just want to see your journey as well. Because if you're following me on mine, I want to follow you on yours. So go have a good week. Go stay safe. Enjoy some flight sim if you can. Let me know in the comments below if you actually got Microsoft 2024. I haven't got it yet, but it does look very cool. So that might be another project coming up later. So yeah, go enjoy your week, guys. I will see you in the next episode. We've got some really cool episodes coming to finish off 2024.